Hey, welcome to the Bitcoin Lens episode 5. Today I have a really special guest, CJ Konstantinos, and I've been following CJ now for about at least 6 months on X. He's just one of the talented guys out there, when it comes to finance, to Bitcoin. And really, we just wanted to get a chance today to meet him a little bit and kind of hear his perspective on the global geopolitics, the economy, Bitcoin, and just learn a little bit about CJ himself as well. So CJ, welcome to the Bitcoin Lens.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate your content as well. I agreed to come on the show because I enjoy your perspective, and I think you're also an underfollowed person in the industry, and just keep at it. It's really tough. Sometimes it feels like the algo is working against you, but the goal really is to just orange pill as many people as possible, because even though we can go to the grocery store and everything seems like it's okay, remember, think back to COVID. These things change in an instant. In one day, everything can change. And if you don't start getting prepared now, when that day comes, there's not going to be much you can do. So thank you for what you do, reaching out to people to teach them. And hopefully we can deliver a couple of good orange pills here today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, hey, great to have you. So first of all, let's kind of kick it off with, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your background? I don't really know too much about your background other than what I've seen on X. When did you adopt Bitcoin? And, I assume you consider yourself a Bitcoin maximalist. And if you do, why?
Yeah, that's a funny question. So this is just over a decade I've been in the industry. So got a few cycles under my belt at this point. Created the Bitcoin fair value algorithm. Recently founded People's Reserve. Really excited for some of these new financial products we're going to be bringing to market in Q1 of next year. But it's funny you say Bitcoin maxi, because it has a little bit of a negative connotation, I think, because of some people in the industry. But everybody should be a Bitcoin maxi, according to my definition. And my definition is Bitcoin is money, and it's actually the first real money that we have as humanity. It's the first technological progression into money. We know we went from a candle to a light bulb, from a horse to a car, from a newspaper to a cell phone and tablets, and now we're going from money to Bitcoin. And it's just the natural technological evolution and advancement of money. And we just happen to be alive at this time. So it's really crazy that we are alive when money is discovered, and it's an engineered money. It takes the best of what we learned from thousands of years of history, especially with gold, teaching us a lot of the characteristics of money, and then building on top of it to be an engineered, better version of it. And I always like to say you can take a bow from a tree and you can carve from that branch or from that wood a bow, and it's gonna shoot true, and it's gonna be great. But if you design a bow and you engineer it and you build it in a factory, it's going to be apex predator. It's going to be peak performance, peak strength, peak speed, peak everything, because it's engineered. And that's what Bitcoin's doing. So as a maxi, you have to understand that Bitcoin is money, and there is no need for anything else to compete with Bitcoin. We now have money, and to compete with Bitcoin is self-destruction. That's one of the saddest things I've seen with Ether, because when I first got involved with Ether, it was not money. It was gas. It was gas to help me execute smart contracts for my money, to help unlock some of that equity that was trapped in the digital realm, so that it can begin to earn yield or be borrowed or lent against. The whole DeFi boom was an amazing thing that took place. And I'm excited to see DeFi get built on Bitcoin layer twos. So there's just so much to look forward to. And as a Bitcoin maximalist, nothing can compete with Bitcoin. That's what Bitcoin maxi means. It doesn't mean toxicity. It doesn't mean hatred. It doesn't mean any of those things. We're orange peace love over here. Bitcoin is the true orange peace. We don't need green peace. We need more orange peace. We can flip the incentives and fix a lot of things with Bitcoin. So if anything else is trying to compete with Bitcoin, or trying to even be money, I would stay away from it with a 1,000-foot pole. And it's a shit coin is what we call it, right?
Absolutely.
But that's my definition as a maxi. That's what it means. Bitcoin is money, and now let's move on. Let's start to build the future on our new money.
Perfect, perfect. And I kind of see everyone going on this. It looks like everyone goes on a similar journey. Like I also started in crypto like you said, the shit coins in 2016, 2017 started with Bitcoin actually, funnily enough, but I didn't understand Bitcoin. And I see a problem with many people where they don't really understand the problem Bitcoin is solving.
Mm.
So the first time they approach Bitcoin, it's just like it's one of the rest of crypto. And I found that was kind of what I dealt with. I ended up landing at Ethereum, and ultimately I landed Cardano. And it took me till like literally last year where I first like truly understood, first of all, the financial system around us and the problem that Bitcoin solves from that. And I think without understanding the problem that you're trying to solve, Bitcoin doesn't really make much sense. Like if you don't understand the core issue we're facing, I think that's what I've really been talking to a lot of people about. It's just the fact that I feel like we need to educate people more about the fundamental problems in our system rather than just saying, "Hey, here's Bitcoin. Let me tell you what Bitcoin does." You know what I'm saying? So I'm curious. Did you also start a journey on like with other crypto and land on Bitcoin, or did you like you said, did you just do
I was
Ether and then landed with Bitcoin?
Yeah, I was actually really blessed because I found this guy named Jeff Booth or Jeff Berwick. I like Jeff Booth too. I found him early on,
Yes.
but Jeff Berwick was the first I came across and he introduced me to Bitcoin and explained the value proposition, the whole thing. Uh, and thankfully it just clicked for me. And I think what was so interesting about it was I never learned about it in school. It was like kind of the opposite of everything I had paid to learn about business and finance. So it was just weird because it was a different idea, but that's what caught my attention. It was different and it intrigued me. And I had a good mentor who brought me under his wing and showed me the ropes, so to say. And then later on, like I was saying earlier, Ether was a gas. This was about smart contracts. Just discrete log contracts weren't going to cut it, and there was too many upgrades that needed to take place, and these are really hard to push into the core. So it was like, okay, we can use this other thing where if it fails, who cares? Because it's not going to break Bitcoin. All right. The important thing
Exactly.
is Bitcoin stays strong. And, Bitcoin is why the whole industry exists. So let's build things that complement Bitcoin because that's the real money. And that's when he started teaching me about Ethereum. So I went from Bitcoin to Ethereum. And then from there, I went into DeFi. And and to me, that's one of the most interesting spaces in the entire industry because uh, kind of going back to what you were alluding to, which is what's wrong with the system? What's the problem here? And part of that problem is there's not free market interest rates, right? When a group of men can come out and state the overnight interest rate, well, that manipulates the rest of the yield curve. So even though they don't
Mhm.
have control of the notes and the bonds and the free market has the ability to sell those off, I think if you look at the 10-year and you look at the 30-year chart, there's something going on, right? M2 is expanding, but we're supposed to be doing quantitative tightening. It's not adding up. I think, and I just did a podcast with Lawrence Lepard, and he agreed that there's some yield curve control, some shadow yield curve control going on, because ultimately, if they lose the control of the long end of the curve, then really what's that going to result in is admitted curve control, right? No longer in the shadows. It brings it out. And the other concern is now you can't get the debt structured long term. It's short term. It's continuously rolling over at these higher rates because the rate before all this started was around 2 to 3, and now the whole curve is above 4 or above 3.5 at this point because of the expectations, and that lowers that interest rate burden. So all of these things just from the central bank naming one overnight rate, it affects all these different things, and that removes the free market element from the marketplace. And in Bitcoin and in DeFi, it's all free market. The interest rate is based on the supply of money and the demand for loans. And if the supply of money is going up and the demand for loans is staying flat, rates will go. It's the natural law of economics. Rates will go down
100%.
because supply is going up. It's this. These are the natural laws where we can anticipate the other marketplace participants' behavior, and that's what's important about having the natural rules of law in charge of the situation. Because when it's men, look at the government. The Fed raised the interest rates. The government did not act the way they were incentivized to act, right? They're supposed to spend less money because the interest rate is higher. They're supposed to back away from that, just like consumers. Consumers are supposed to back away from that. Credits are at all-time high right now because of the weakness of the economy and how these people have to get through using their credit card. But the economy, we saw the demand destruction. The government is demanding more. They're printing more money. They're running larger deficits and demanding more with that money. They did not
So,
act the way they're incentivized to act. So all of that goes back to like just removing the free market element of that interest rate. And Bitcoin solves that problem for money, but decentralized finance solves that problem for all of finance.
100%. So on that topic with, centralized figures manipulating numbers, I know you've been pretty vocal as well about like, unemployment rates, which I saw the unemployment rate now is I think at 4.3%. That doesn't account for government jobs added. You look at CPI, CPI is now 2.9%. I know you've been very vocal about that as well. Do you kind of want to like let the audience know like your thoughts on those two specific numbers? Because I think those are two pretty key metrics that seems like they're pretty manipulated.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And you got your finger on the pulse, man. You're spot on here. And all these numbers, the most important numbers that we're using, which is CPI and unemployment and manufacturing and GDP,
Mhm.
all of these things, when you properly account for CPI, are signaling that we are in recession and we have been in recession. And a lot of people probably don't know this because they don't remember or they haven't studied it. I'm just one of those weird finance guys who likes to study the history of finance. Well, if you go back to the Great Recession in 2008, well, it's just like it was now. In 2008, they were publishing news articles about how strong the economy was. And it was later on, it was in hindsight, right? Hindsight is 2020. They didn't get it right when they were in the heat of the moment. And they went back and they revised the data and they figured out, whoa, this problem really started in 2007, right? So
Yes.
it's like 2009, and they're like, well, 2 years. I think that's what's going to happen this time. They don't think they're waiting too long, but they have waited too long to lower the rates. The demand destruction worked, and the Federal Reserve came out raising those interest rates to destroy the demand of the economy, but they're not accounting for inflation properly. And what that means is that the analysts are mistakenly accounting price increases or inflation, prices going up because of the dilution of the dollar, as economic growth. So if price increases are going up 10%, you have to deflate GDP. You have to properly take away the price increase that's the result of inflation in order to see if there's any real economic growth. And when the government says inflation is 3%, but you go back to their 1982 version, which your listeners can go check out govflation.com. We've done that. We go back to the pre-substitution equation, and that's what we use according to them, right? Nothing to do with me. This is their equation. The government paid to design this equation. Let's just go back to that because it's more accurate. We're over 10%. So you're talking from 3% to 10%. That's a 7% difference. So if they do not deflate GDP properly, they're going to mistakenly think that the economy is strong because they're counting that 7% of inflation as economic growth rather than inflation. And that's where all the confusion is coming in because real GDP says the economy is strong. But that's because you're deflating by the wrong deflator, which is not the same as CPI. The deflator doesn't have imports, but the same BS is going on, and they're understating the real price increases, which creates artificial economic growth. But then when you look at those other metrics that we talked about, unemployment, um, manufacturing, manufacturing has been in a bear market since the end of 2022, which matches up with real GDP when you properly deflate it. And unemployment, now I have to say, my cup of tea, my what I'm really good at is inflation. I don't think anybody's going to teach me anything about inflation. I'd love to learn something, but I've studied it long enough where I understand it in and out. I've just started digging into unemployment. So, fact check me and message me and teach me something because I'm willing to learn. But what I learned was that unemployment is actually worse than inflation. So my fears came true because I figured, oh, it can't be that bad, but it really is. It's even worse
Mm-hmm.
than bad. And they went from using U6 to U3, And it's the same manipulation. It's a change in methodology. And let me say this too, because a lot of people right now in their head are saying, well, the data is real, CJ. You're right. The data is real. It is a miracle that the government collects all of this data from 300 plus million people, aggregates it together, and then shares it with us through API. Thank God they're able to do that. It's probably the only thing the government does right. Well, it's the methodology of them taking that accurate data and plugging it in to an equation that alters the state of the data, which then alters the outcome and conclusions that can be drawn from the data. So the data is accurate. Thank you for sharing the data, but your methodology is wrong and it's skewing the data. And now you go back to unemployment. Unemployment is actually at 7.3%. 7.3%. And people think it's at 4. People think, it went around, the SOM rule went around the other day, right? On the X, like, oh, it got triggered. Everybody and their mother started posting about it like they're some expert. It was hilarious. I love how that happens on crypto Twitter. Everybody becomes a doctor. Everybody becomes a lawyer. Just great. But the fact of the matter is that triggering has never been wrong. That triggering has never been wrong. And I saw some people come out and even say, well, the reason it got triggered is because there's so many illegal people coming over the borders. And I said, okay, that's an interesting take, but it's really just an excuse because it has 100%. People have been coming over illegally the borders for a long time. This is not new. It's just that now it's getting really bad and there's more than usual, but it's been going on for quite a bit of time. So none of the results are going to be skewed because there's been no real change. It's just now that the problem is worse. And when you look at unemployment and you say 7.3%, some rule triggered, we're growing at half a percentage point year over year. This is the point where the Federal Reserve should be lowering interest rates to support the economy, but they're not. And that's because the data is manipulated through the methodology and is sending out false signals. And if we could just get them to understand, and that's the question. People, do they understand it? Do they get it? Why are they doing it? I'm sure I know you saw my CPI tweet. Like, if the government kept CPI methodology the same, Social Security payments today, instead of having an $1,800 average, would have an $11,400 average. Well, there you go. That's just one example of how the system is incentivized to misstate the rate of inflation. There's many other examples, but all those incentives create corrupted results, corrupted data analytics, which then leads to these people who are in charge making the wrong decisions at the wrong times. And it's been going on and on and on and on and on. It's not like, okay, well, can you get it right this time? What are we on? Like, we're going to like QE5, QE6. We're going to keep going and going and going. This is not QE1. This is not QE2. It's the same thing over and over again. And that's the definition of insanity, when you do the same thing and you expect a different result. What's different this time? We have Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the bailout of we the people.
Yes. So what do you say to people who say, okay, well, maybe the numbers are manipulated, but they're manipulated consistently across administrations? Or do you see evidence that it's not manipulated consistently in this incorrect manner, if you will?
Yeah, I would agree with them. I would say it has been manipulated consistently. And I think that's because it's just an equation, right? So when you change an equation, you don't have to manipulate anything. You plug the numbers and the equation does the manipulation. So I don't even think some of these people in their job, they're probably just collecting a paycheck, going back to their family, bringing the kids to soccer. And hey, the government gave me this equation. I didn't create this equation. This is my job. I'm supposed to plug these numbers here and hit publish.
Yeah. So just to be clear, it's not a partisan issue. It's just a federal government issue.
Absolutely. It's definitely not a partisan issue. It's been accurate. It's been inaccurate accurately, if that's even a good way to put it, throughout time, regardless of which party is in place. Because really, and I'm so sick and tired of our two-party system, the left versus right paradigm. And then you have these independents. But the problem with the independents are that you don't want to make anything illegal. You don't want a government, but then these other people are taking over the government and then using the power of the law against you. So it's like the Constitution. You have to use the power of the law to protect your rights. So you have to be involved. And that's where we're stuck right now. It's this left-right paradigm. And you got people like RFK being completely ignored. And if honestly, it should be RFK versus Trump. That's really what it should be. And then we'd have a pretty decent
Yes.
choice.
So yeah, hundred
It's
percent.
crazy, man.
And I'm gonna get to that. I would definitely want to get to that as well. But I just quickly wanted to, just looking at our current landscape in the US and looking at all the craziness that's been going on with some of the numbers. You look at, for instance, $100 trillion we're adding to the debt every 100 days now. The US debt to GDP ratio about 125%, if I'm not mistaken. Um, Inflation numbers, like we just said, are way off in reality. Unemployment are way off when you consider government jobs being added. Then you look at Japan and you look at the yen carry trade fiasco that happened a week ago, causing essentially a 20, 30%, stock drop and
Mhm.
Bitcoin drop crash. You look at the central bank of Japan owning about 53% of their debt. And, you look at the yen losing about, I think it's about 100% almost now of their value against the US dollar, roughly over the last 13, 14 years. And, Japan's debt to GDP ratio about 250%. If I'm just, and you're more versed in this, so I really want your opinion on this, is if a country like Japan can still kind of stand on one leg here, and on one toe and, almost falling apart from all these numbers I just said, how long can we keep playing in the US? How long can we keep playing this debt game and this market manipulation game? If you look at Japan, I mean, it seems like we can play this forever. Or
Yeah,
what is your opinion on this?
I agree. It can go on indefinitely, and it will go on indefinitely until one moment. Because this is one of the most interesting things you can study about fiat currency, because they always fail. There's never been one that's succeeded. But was it 200% the GDP, 300% the GDP? Is it like the textbooks? It's 50% per month inflation. They try to mathematically define going from inflation to hyperinflation. But from my studies, there is no way to do that. It's different in each country. It's different in each economy. Um, but the one catalyst that is the same across all of those examples is trust. So my position is we will not transition from inflation into hyperinflation until there is a loss of trust. Now just ask yourself, do you trust your government more today or more yesterday? Right?
Yeah,
Where's the trend of
that's an
trust
easy
going?
that's an easy question.
So, as trust continues to decline, like all fiat currencies, this will fail. But it is an element of trust, because trust is the same thing. It doesn't matter if you go to Greece or if you go to Rome or if you go to Weimar or Argentina or Venezuela. It doesn't matter where you go. It's always an element of trust. And you look at the Argentines, they still trust, which is why their dollars aren't sitting in the street like they are in Venezuela. It was in Venezuela they don't trust. Look, now they don't
Hmm.
trust the result of the elections. You see the difference? Malay
Yes.
won, they trusted the results.
Hmm.
Venezuela, whatever that guy's, Maduro won, they don't trust the results. One country still trusts what the government says, the other country does not
Hmm.
trust what the government says. That's the difference between inflation and hyperinflation. And that's one of my biggest concerns moving into this election, because now we see them moving forward with this monkeypox thing. And now, it's going to be another lockdown. Trump came out and warned about that. We got to stand up and say, we will not comply. We're not going to do this stuff. That's it. For him to come out and say that when we're less than 90 days away from the election is actually showing you how much of a threat it truly is, because he,
Hmm.
he would not come out and take the risk of hashing up all that. He didn't make all the best decisions through that, right? We did Operation Warp Speed. Yeah, he didn't force the vax, but he basically, unsafe vaccines went ahead and made their way through and harmed people. So there were a lot of fumbles during that. He wouldn't want to point back to that moment to say, I'm the best. But here he is pointing back and say, look, they're going to try to do this again. Because the fact of the matter is, when you look at that chart, it was the same chart in Venezuela that we had here in the United States. You had the two arcs, and then overnight, it just jumped up. How? How does that happen? I look at charts all day. You look at charts all day. That is an unnatural occurrence. That doesn't happen unless markets are open, and like Bitcoin, it's open 24/7, 365, but then the
Hmm.
ETFs open Monday morning and there's a gap.
Hmm.
We create gaps in
Yes.
the chart. The only way you gap the chart is if something is unnatural is happening when everybody's not paying attention. And that is really what I think is being geared up. I think in the state of Georgia, they found out, and it was actually confirmed in the court of law. There were over 300,000 votes that were cast from ineligible voters. They were either deceased or not eligible to vote. Well, Biden
Yes.
won Georgia by 12,000 votes. So
Mm.
we know for a fact, just on that, if you just split it, even 60% Trump, 40%, it doesn't matter what you split it. It's only 12,000 votes. So it could be even a high percentage of votes for Trump. There were more than 12,000 votes that were ineligible that were cast for Biden. And that was the difference in winning that state.
Hmm.
So, it really frustrates me because I can't walk into another country without getting arrested, without showing them all my papers. They're doing that here. And it just doesn't make sense. All these things don't make sense. And I just interviewed who Adam Stokes, good friend of mine. He's an
Hmm.
Australian and he military for 20 years, good strategist. And he
Hmm.
said, CJ, and your listeners can do the same exercise. If the Democrats lose or the Republicans lose, is there any case scenario where one side's just going to turn to the other side and say, well, good match, guys. We'll get you next time. Like, does that make,
No chance.
no chance. Now in 2020, I believe the blue team stole it from the red team, and I
Hmm.
think the evidence came out, but it just came out too late. And the MAGA people, they call us conservatives for a reason, right? Because we want to just live our lives peaceably. We just want to
Hmm.
deliver value from people, receive value from people, have a good, strong economy, and rules that make sense and laws that protect our God-given rights. Well, you could see how that J6 was just completely fake because if real patriots stood up, then there have been way more shots fired and it wouldn't have just lasted a few hours. I can tell you that
Hmm.
much. And everybody who
Hmm.
has a brainstem understands that concept. So if they steal it again, are the conservatives going to be okay with it this time? Because our first reaction was conservative. Our first reaction was peaceful protests, bring it to the courts. What's the second reaction going to be? Who knows? I don't know. I
Hmm.
don't. It's not my
Hmm.
choice. I don't know how it's going to work out. And then if Trump wins because it's too big to rig or whatever, um, imagine. Wouldn't surprise me if we found
Hmm.
out that more people voted in the election that were actually eligible to vote. If we have
Okay.
even our population, we have 300 million people. I bet you 500 million people vote in the election. It's gonna be magic. That's the extent that they're willing to go to, and that's how dumb they think we are with all this mainstream media propaganda. But if they win, and Trump wins, what are these people gonna do? Because they went crazy after they won. They won in 2020 and then
Hmm.
came after all the J6 protesters to
Yeah.
persecute them and throw them in prison. They
Yeah.
won and took extreme action. So you're going to tell me that they're not going to take extreme action if they lose? And tying this back to
Yeah.
Bitcoin and finance, because that's my number one angle on all things I like to talk about. This absolutely has an effect on Bitcoin and finance because you're talking about civil unrest in the United States of America. And you're now talking about civil war risk on US treasuries. I can tell you right now, that is for sure not priced into US treasuries. People are buying US treasuries right now with the mindset of, oh, baby, they're going to be forced to lower rates and I'm going to get a capital return and I can sell them back and then buy more stuff. Like it's supposed to be like the most obvious trade of the century. Well, things that people think are going to happen don't always happen that way, especially when the majority of people think they're going to happen that way. That's the whole point of that the mindset. It starts with a C. I'm dropping the word here when you're opposite of like what the mainstream people think. But that's an important concept. You're not
Yes.
always following the crowd. You can go against the crowd. And
Yes.
especially in price discovery moments, people think the price of Bitcoin is going to go up, goes down. People think the price is going to go down, goes up. And that's what
Exactly.
I'm talking about right here. So it's so interesting because I don't think civil unrest and civil war risk is being priced into US treasuries, which are known as the risk-free rate, because there's no credit risk, right? The Federal
Yes.
Reserve can print the money and you're going to get your money. Now, when you get your money, you're not sure what you're going to be able to buy. That's the inflation risk. And
Hmm.
that used to be the only risk. But now there's a civil war risk because what if there's
Yeah.
civil unrest or what if there's a
Yeah.
fallout after the election that it's definitely a non-zero number. And how does that affect US treasuries? Because the last time we had a civil war, the first thing that happened was the South couldn't bank with their enemies. They had to create their own separate banking system. So they issued Confederate fiat debt notes. They issued Confederate currency. So at that point, the North still had control of the treasury. But at this point, what if both people are fighting for power over the treasury? Who then has the power of the treasury? Who rolls the debt? Who prints the money? How do these things work in that type of scenario or situation when we're trying to
Yeah.
figure out who has the power and the rule of law? It's going to be very interesting times,
Yes.
that's for sure.
100%. So yeah, I agree. And I think on both sides, one I think we all should want fair elections, same day elections. You know, even if you don't believe the election was stolen, there's still a lot of circumstantial evidence that makes you just like wonder about the integrity of the election, and that's what concerns a lot of people. Like I mean, why are the borders wide open? When it could be closed with a simple executive order. Why do we not need voter ID when we should go vote? Why are some states now reported as being registering illegal voters? So, those things it's kind of concerning circumstantial evidence. But even if you don't have any hard evidence, it's still concerning when you see that. It's like, why? If it's such an easy fix, I think I read the other day, we're one of the only first world countries in the world that doesn't do same day voting. So you got to ask yourself why. Like, what's the incentive for that? Like, if you're sick or if you're ill or disabled or whatever, you could, yes, let's make an exception for that. But why let the whole country in some states, or why let the whole state vote with mail-in ballots if we know in person is way more secure? So that integrity, I think, is very important. But hey, man, I wanted to kind of jump onto a next topic here that I'm kind of curious about your point of view here, and that is the BRICS side. So basically, we got 9 BRICS member nations right now. Turkey's on the cusp of attending the BRICS summit, which Turkey is a NATO nation. Many new memberships, streaming in. We got that BRICS summit in October. They're going to announce a new currency. Apparently, it's likely going to be backed by gold. And right now, as we know, this is still an economic alliance between these countries. But what if this turns into a military alliance? And so really the question on this is, how do you think BRICS and this newly introduced currency and this right now economic alliance that could turn into a military alliance could impact kind of the US's stronghold and from an economic and military standpoint, and also as a global reserve currency?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm not sure it's going to be gold backed. To be honest with you, because I don't think that any of those governments want to give up their ability to print fiat. It's a global problem. Every single country is abusing the printer and extracting value from their citizenry. So if you attach gold to a BRICS currency, that's those countries agreeing to give up the power of being able to extract value from their citizens. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
not really sure that they're going to do that. And then if they do that, I'm not really sure they thought it through that much. And I have to be, I say that with the utmost respect for the people who are thinking what's best for their people, right? Because each president, each country should be thinking about what's best for their people. Does it make sense for us to build stuff and sell it to the Americans for dollars when they are printing that money at an aggressive rate? So, you wouldn't be doing your job if you weren't asking that question. But then if you were asking those questions and you were coming from that perspective, why wouldn't you be asking about Bitcoin? Well, and maybe they are. Maybe this gold thing is, I mean, I like to say it like this. The financial realm is the place where World War III started. So World War III has already begun, and it's in the financial realm. So
Mm-hmm.
it would not be smart. Only the Americans leave their enemy with billions of dollars of equipment. Only the
Yeah.
Americans announce their strategic reserve before they can implement it, right? They're coming from the art of war. So maybe this is a misdirection that they're saying, hey, gold, 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 gold. And they have a lot of gold, and gold's going to continue to do well. But you really have to think, why haven't they mentioned Bitcoin? So it's either number one, it's a strategic position because it doesn't make sense to reveal that you're building that Bitcoin position because of game theory. Everybody else, it's going to accelerate everybody else going after what has a very limited supply, and you're going to end up with less than you could have. So I think that's playing a factor. Um, but I'd be really interested to see like why they think, why would China always trust India, or India always trust Russia, or any of the African countries trust either of them, especially after China coming in and writing a whole bunch of debt notes and then ceasing the land and owning the land over there. So it's a trust problem, right? The problem is the trust. You
Mm-hmm.
hear Peter Schiff, a
Yes.
great economist, but now you hear him talking about, oh, well, we could put gold on the blockchain. No, because you still have to store it in the vault. So you still have to trust a centralized party. Bitcoin
Yes.
removes it's trustless. It means that you don't even have to think about trust. And that's the real value here. that you can settle with other countries without the trust factor. And that's what Bitcoin brings to the table on the sovereign level. And that's the
Hmm.
value proposition at the sovereign level. So it's just weird. It's almost like it's strategy and they're doing it on purpose, or when they finally reveal it, they're gonna be talking about Bitcoin. And then all those charts we see of how much countries own Bitcoin are going to be updated because it was just wrong the whole time because they strategically kept their mouths shut. But also long run, we still have what 6 or 7% of the supply to be mined. So we may not be hearing these things for a really long time. And the fact that this announcement is coming sooner rather than later, maybe it is gold, and maybe it is one of the
Hmm.
biggest bluff. I mean, this could be one of the biggest blunders in the world because BRICS actually had a chance to take us down, but they went with gold instead of with Bitcoin. And to be honest, I think the rule of law from the United States, as bad as it is here, as bad as the legal lawfare has become, we still have the Constitution. And
Hmm.
no other country in the world has the Constitution. No other country in the world has the law of the land protecting your God-given rights. So I
Yes.
don't want to see the United States lose. I love that tweet you sent about Bitcoin and the dollar working together. I love what Trump said when he said, I'm going to use stable coins to expand the dominance of the dollar. Financial war is now being fought. And that is the beginning of World War III. And look at who's leading. I don't even know who's leading us right now. We're fighting a war, and
Hmm.
I don't even know who's leading us. It's of the utmost concern that BRICS is getting organized. We need to get organized as well. And I think People's Reserve and Bitcoin bonds is going to play a big role in that.
So CJ, so just let's quickly just talk about the dollar, assuming the dollar collapses, hyperinflates. How do we think we're going to price Bitcoin? Are we going to price Bitcoin in the next global reserve currency? Perhaps price it into, a different commodity like gold, or is Bitcoin just going to be priced in Satoshis or within itself? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, that's a great question because we're already on the energy standard. And I don't think we're going to shift from the energy standard. It's just going to be a better medium to understanding the value of that energy. Right now, we see it in oil dollar, but we're about to see it in electricity and Satoshis. So I think the world will continue to be priced in energy. And what you're going to see is that Bitcoin is that monetized energy that is finite in supply. So everything will crash to zero against Bitcoin, or everything will trend down against Bitcoin over time, even as we continue to develop more technologies and get closer and closer to free and abundant energy because of the difficulty adjustment, because of the engineered design of Bitcoin. It's going to work through time to always store value through that commodity cycle. So I think, we're already pricing the world in energy, and we're going to continue to price the world in energy. It's just right now we use the dollar oil reference point. In the future, we'll use the sats to probably kilowatt hour point because everything takes energy. You can measure production in energy. You can measure consumption in energy. So the real game here is energy. But now, what becomes um, important when the energy standard is more revealed than it is now are the balance sheets of the two competing uh, groups of nations, NATO versus BRICS. And the problem is in NATO in the West, we have the liability side of our balance sheet is pumped up big time. And the asset side of our balance
Hmm.
sheet is, let's just say, protected by perceived economic growth. And
Yes.
on the other side of the table, on the East and in BRICS, the asset side of their balance sheet is pumped up. And their liability side is actually pretty aggressive too. That goes back to the me saying that they don't want to give up the ability to print and add those liabilities. They are still pumping liabilities as well, but they have the assets. We're pumping the liabilities, and we don't necessarily have the same assets that they have. We don't have the cash flow that they have. We don't have the trade surpluses that they have. We don't make anything here. All we do is consume. So
Hmm.
revealing this energy standard is going to, I think, be kind of a shock to everybody because the level of energy output here in the West relative to the amount of energy input is skewed when measured against those other economies. So over time, we'll struggle and they'll succeed. And that's why it's so important when Trump came out and said, we're going to have a strategic national stockpile or reserve
Hmm.
of Bitcoin. Because what that does is it bolsters the asset side of your balance sheet. So even as your liabilities continue to grow, As long as the asset side of your balance sheet is growing faster, you're not going to have any problem. Right now, the only thing that's bolstering the asset side of our balance sheet is our economy. And now we have to borrow $1 to create less than $1 of economic growth. We're in trouble. We need something else on the asset side of our balance sheet to help. And that's Bitcoin. And that's Bitcoin bonds. When you talk about Social Security and Medicaid and pension plans and different funds, that's how you get ahead.
So on that to that point, what do you think is going to be? So me and you know that, and the Bitcoin community knows that. But how do you think, other than education like this, what do you think? What like pivotal change, like global or local change, has to happen for the masses to flip to Bitcoin? What do you think is going to be that determining factor that makes many people flip at once? Many people use the whole gradually, then suddenly. What's going to be that suddenly for the masses to flip to Bitcoin?
Yeah, great question. And it's the loss of trust. And now the catalyst to the loss of trust, in my opinion, is the hyperinflationary depression that we're now going into. And I think this can best be defined by someone like Warren Buffett, who is so entrenched into the old school way of doing things
Mm-hmm.
that he's kind of missing how, I mean, don't get me wrong, obviously a great investor. Look at his company. I mean,
Yes.
it's uh, you can't say too many bad things about the guy. He's really good at what he does. You have to respect that. But at the same time, it's like somebody who doesn't want to adopt the internet, or it's someone who doesn't want to adopt the cell phone and they just want to continue to write letters or only have a storefront with no digital marketplace. You're not going to perform as well. Something, you're going to be lagging behind. And his investing mindset is now has Berkshire Hathaway at $277 billion of cash.
Mm-hmm.
So he knows a crash is coming. Everybody knows
Yes.
a crash is coming. The problem is that we are moving from an inflationary recession to a hyperinflationary depression. When this crash comes, it's going to be worse than the Great Depression. Now, your listeners are listening right now and saying, "Oh, prices are going to go down." Well, why are you saying that? Because when prices go down, your quality of life and your standard of living go up. So if we had a Great Depression, your overall net worth would go down, but your quality of life and your standard of living would increase if you have dollar savings. But
But
that's
but to
not what's
that
going to
but
happen.
but to
That's
that
not
point, that requires the government to allow that to happen, right? And you know better than any of us. I mean, they can just keep this game playing, and they can keep delaying the inevitable of a massive crash like that.
right. So that's why I think everybody's that's why there's $6 trillion on the sideline waiting to buy the dip.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the educational component here. You have to understand that when we in an inflationary environment where we have fiscal dominance, where government spending and deficit monetization drives prices, this is the issue. When you have a crash, prices crash up. They don't crash down. That's the actual problem. That's what Warren is missing because that's the paradigm shift. Most of his career didn't work that way, and now the paradigm has shifted. Everything that he studied, and when he was in the 70s and 80s, he was living it. He was navigating it, but he studied from the 40s and earlier. We get the chance
Mm-hmm.
to look back and study the moves that he made during those
Mm-hmm.
times and go forward. So now where he is in life, that's why people retire so that you can enjoy those final years. Things have changed, times have changed. You put in your value to society. Now you can sit back and relax and enjoy the fruits of your labor. And what he's missing is that there's been a shift. There's been a foundation. Yes, a crash is coming, but it doesn't work the way you think it's going to work, Warren. The prices aren't going to go back down. Your 277 billion isn't going to buy you more. It's going to buy you less because its prices are crashing up. And the problem is purchasing power is crashing down. And that is why this crash is going to be worse than the Great Depression, because the Great Depression would actually increase your quality of life and standard of living. It would allow more people to participate in the economy. This time around, everybody's going to be a millionaire, but nobody's going to be rich. And the economy will die from demand destruction, from prices going up and up and up and up and making life less affordable, reducing quality of life and standard of living. We are heading into the crash, but the crash is in the purchasing power of the dollar, not in asset prices. That's
Hmm.
what people are missing. And that's the educational component that I think is actually more understandable than Bitcoin as engineered money. That if people could just understand that there's been a shift of the results and the effects of a crash or a problem. Look at
Hmm.
Silicon Valley Bank. We had a
Hmm.
crash. What happened? Bank term funding program, liquidity
Hmm.
rose. That's
Yes.
inflation. We fix things with it. We target inflation. So until the central bank comes out and says we're no longer targeting inflation, well, they're going to fulfill their mandate to keep prices steady and employment steady. They're going to use inflation to target inflation to create inflationary growth, which, as you well know, is not real
Hmm.
economic
Hmm.
growth. It's a false growth that doesn't pass through the system the same way as a strong economic demand does. So that's the issue. If people can just learn, yes, we're going into a crash, but the purchasing power is crashing, not prices. And
Hmm.
that's the mix up. So hopefully, those who are listening to this, you can tell your family and friends and share this and get people
Hmm.
to understand the best way to prepare is to keep your savings in Bitcoin because Bitcoin
Yes.
is an absolute scarce asset. You can expand the supply of gold. A
Hmm.
lot of the gold bugs will tell you, oh, when BRICS backs their currency with gold, they're going to reprice gold. Gold's going to be $50,000 an ounce. The problem with that is that if the price of gold overnight goes from 2,500 to 50,000, the cost of production didn't. So what are they going
Hmm.
to do? They're going to build spaceships to fly out, get asteroids, and increase the supply of
Exactly.
gold in ways we never thought about. So absolute
Mm.
digital scarcity is why Bitcoin is the real bailout because it's the only way to protect your purchasing power. It's the only way your purchasing power will grow over time because of that absolute digital scarcity. Then you get the added bonus, inflation protected your purchasing power as a result of protecting against inflation, but it doesn't have a
Hmm.
difficulty adjustment. Bitcoin has a difficulty adjustment. So inflation is just like a bonus booster to Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't need inflation to go up in price. The growth of the network will cause that through the relationship
Yes.
between hash rate and difficulty and cost of production. And that's the real magic component of Bitcoin. It's a double whammy. You get protected from inflation, but you also get engineered money that was designed to be the
Mm.
best store of value we've ever seen.
So, in a nutshell, what you just said there is once society realizes we live in a superficial life of prosperity and realize there's a harder currency or a harder option out there, that's when the flip comes.
That's right. Because people will be working harder, they'll be making more money, but they'll be buying less stuff and they'll be living a lower quality of life and standard of living. And eventually, by the way, that is the cultural societal aspect of money. That's why we're seeing culture and society break down. Why back then did we not see people with blue and pink hair? Why did we not see men who think they were boys and girls vice versa? Where's all this confusion coming from? Well, what's interesting is when you have a strong money and economy, these things are actually minimized. But if you go back to Weimar Germany, if you go back to Rome and you go back to Greece, these crazy haired, confused people start popping up again because the
Hmm.
value of your money is being diluted, even if it's gold, even if it's that silver denarius having 90% silver down to less than 5% silver. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter when your purchasing power is being stolen from you, it creates pressure on people. And that pressure lowers your quality of life standard of living, changes your mindset and your behaviors and your relationship with other people. And now
Hmm.
this is the problem we have today. And it's unbelievable that people say our industry says that Bitcoin fixes this. And it's just funny because it applies to so many
Hmm.
different things, but even socially and culturally, Bitcoin can fix this, but it's not going to fix it until everybody knows there's a problem. But we're very
Hmm.
close. We're seeing all the signs, right? We have the confused people, we have the lies and manipulation of data, we have ridiculous debt to GDP numbers. All the bells and whistles are going off. And that's why I say, this next move into hyperinflation, there's $6 trillion on the sideline. Where's it going to go? When
Hmm.
rates go back down to 5%, or maybe to 4.75 or 4.5, whatever that target range is, some of that money's going to come back in. Then when it goes down to 4 and 3.5, some of that money's going to come back in. Then if something goes wrong and they have to have an emergency cut down to zero, all that money's going to come rushing back in. And if there is no emergency cut and they just keep lowering and lowering, lowering, the money's going to keep coming back in. And as the money comes back in, it creates demand. And demand against limited supply forces price up. So, and when rates are lower, people are going to borrow more. So not only will you get increased economic demand, you're also going to have currency inflation because the government is going to have to support the economy that the Fed just destroyed, which means deficits are going to grow because the income from the economy is going to shrink. Tax receipts are going to shrink, but your costs are going to stay the same. Deficits increase. That you need more inflation. Interest rates down. People are going to borrow more money to make it through the tough economy. That creates inflation. $6 trillion that earned 5% for the last couple of years is going to come off the sidelines and create economic demand. That creates positive price pressure. We are going into what I think is going to be the worst wave of inflation that we've seen in the history of the United States. It's going to create new all-time high prices in assets, and it's going to create new all-time high inflation rates that we have never seen because it's a triple threat. We're going to be seeing it from the printer of the government, from the printer of the banks, and from the spending of people who have the money on the sideline who now need to get back into the assets. And that could be, in my opinion, I think it's going to be, because I think prices are going to go up a lot faster than people anticipate. Even in Bitcoin, I think prices are going to go up just at a sickening rate. Like, just think of where we were before 2020 to where we are now. You know, you look at the price of the median price of a home and you're like, whoa, man, I'm a genius. You know, I made a great investment. But no, in inflation adjusted terms, you're still even. Your home can't buy you more of anything else. It can't buy you more Apple stock, can't buy you more Nvidia, can't buy you more Bitcoin for sure. It can barely buy you more of anything. You'd be lucky if you're even. It can't even buy you more steak and eggs and lettuce because the prices are just break even at that point. So you're not really growing wealth. And that is the issue. And hyperinflationary depression, I think, is what people will react to. And I think is what will be the catalyst to losing trust. And if that's the case, then watch out, because, you know, when you have a 30-year mortgage and you can go pick dollars up off the ground and walk into the bank and pay your mortgage payment, we got problems. We got really big problems.
So just on the adoption side, there's still, so, you know, you look at a company like Visa, they're processing about 2,200 or 2,400, correct me if I'm wrong there, transactions per second. You look at Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin can process about 4 transactions a second. So how do we, do you think, like, obviously you know the history of the block wars, Bitcoin XD, Bitcoin Cash, you know, SegWit, all these things, you know, the whole fights with the block size and all that for more transactions and all that. Do you think block size will stay the same, or do you think there'll be a change for bigger block size? And whatever you think, why?
Block size will stay the same, and that's because we need to maintain node decentralization, or else the network isn't decentralized. It must be extremely easy and cheap to set up a node. And the bigger a block is, the more intense it is to establish a node. So I don't think that the block size will increase, nor do I think it should increase. And when you think about gold, what's interesting is gold became a store of value. That's how it started out as money. It was hard to find, therefore it was hard to increase the supply. So it started as a store of value. And then we have these banking concepts that start to pop up, right? It's the L2 solution. It's like, hey, man, I can't take this gold into the store and buy bread. And if I do, I got to weigh it out. And it's just not convenient. The velocity of money couldn't increase. The economy was struggling to grow because it's hard to exchange gold between each other. We need a L2 technology. Well, gold's L2 is paper debt derivatives and bank deposit accounts that you can write checks against the Bitcoin. And then once that happened, gold became a medium of exchange. And when it became a medium of exchange, it very quickly became the unit of account. And that's when gold really started to explode. That's when the demand on gold started to go through the roof. And we're so early in Bitcoin. We're in year 15 of Bitcoin. This took hundreds of years for gold to do this. Hundreds of years. We're in year 15. Bitcoin's already doing it. We're already talking about our L2 solutions because we need to keep the block size the same so we can stay decentralized. And now we need a way to increase the velocity of money. We need a way to transfer peer-to-peer quickly and cheaply, because it doesn't make sense to go buy your $5 coffee and spend $2 to do it. You need to do it for fractions of a penny. So we need an L2. And when we get that L2, and by the way, I don't think there's any one solution. My favorite solution is going to be stacks with SBTC, but there's also Lightning and Liquid. So I think the market, there should be choices within a free market, and all of these solutions are going to work, some better in some cases and some better in other cases. And they're all going to provide a service to the marketplace, which is designed to increase the velocity of Bitcoin. So this is fantastic because that's what we need. We need an L2 solution that allows us to increase velocity without compromising block size. And once we get it, then Bitcoin will be accepted as a medium of exchange. Then Bitcoin will be adopted as a unit of account. And then Bitcoin will start to go to global GDP divided by 21 million. We'll move away from the commodity value, which is based on the commodity cycle relative to cost of production, and we'll move up that S curve to monetary value. And the monetary value is based on the entire value of the economy divided by the amount of circulating coins.
Awesome, awesome. That's great explanation there. But hey, I've got one more question here before we have to drop. So we're in election season, and I was at the Bitcoin conference. I don't know if you were able to make it for the Nashville Bitcoin conference, but it was really promising to see like all these politicians over there. You look at Senator Deaton, Senator Loomis, RFK, Donald Trump. I mean, it was really, really, inspiring to see them there and just kind of how the community took them in. From your perspective, is this going to be, is Bitcoin, is the Bitcoin vote going to be a defining vote in this election?
Ooh, I wish I knew the answer to that question. That's a really good one. I think that Bitcoin slash crypto has like one of the biggest, largest PACs to support politicians in the industry. And if I remember correctly, I think 32 of the people who they supported out of 34 won. So the win rate, because of the bankroll, is going to play a big role in all of politics, not just the presidential election. And I think actually the smaller elections are actually more important than the presidential election because if the president could fix everything, then wouldn't have Trump done that the first time, right? You have to have the government is checks and balances as well. So you have to infiltrate. Infiltrate is not the right word. You have to gain representation from your fellow men to go make those decisions and go change those laws and set things up that way. So I think actually on the smaller level, it's even more important than the bigger level, such as president. But yeah, I do think it's going to play a really important role. And politicians are going to start. I mean, we've already seen it, right? When I first started in Bitcoin, people were like, "Oh, politicians are going to accept Bitcoin and talk about it," and on the campaign trail, and you'd be like laughed out of the room. Like people would be like, "You're an idiot, man!" Like they're going to ban it, is what they're going to do. So we've come so far in such a small amount of time. It truly is amazing to see people like RFK speak about all his different orange pills, speak intelligently about the ethos of Bitcoin, and it was even greater to see Trump, who you can tell didn't study it as much as RFK, but still by the promises he made, understood the economics behind it and understood that Bitcoin mining supports the grid and that Bitcoin, a strategic reserve, supports the asset side of our balance sheet. Like, he might not be as orange pilled, but they're still saying it. And then you look over at the other side. Now they had a reset meeting that Kamala didn't even show up to. You have some of the industry leaders who are telling us to trust them, crypto for Harris. Notice how it's not Bitcoin for Harris, it's crypto for Harris, because a lot of the Bitcoiners can see right through this. Because now we go back to what I was talking about before. Those centrics, those middle of the line independent centrics who don't really want to, I don't want to drop any names, but there's one pretty popular dude who just came out and attacked Elon Musk and Donald Trump for what they were doing on Spaces, which is basically equivalent to FDR's fireside chats, which got him more terms as president than any other person in history of the world. Actually, the result of his continuous winning, I think, was because of the fireside chats where he communicated with those people, touched on a personal level with those people. And that's what happened with Trump and Musk on that X space. I felt like I went to a private VIP dinner and got to listen to a conversation. And they should do it weekly. They should cut it down to an hour and do it every week leading up so that Musk and Trump can both become more personable to the people and more trustworthy to the people, right? We got to build trust as it deteriorates over here so that if, God forbid, if something collapses, we have somebody that we can trust. We have somebody that we can turn to. So, yeah, I mean, the Bitcoin vote, we are looking, we trust Bitcoin because it's trustless. Nodes trust nobody so that we can trust anybody. And now, when we look to politics, we're looking for somebody to trust. We can't trust the mainstream media. We can't trust these people who came out and told us. If I'm sorry, but and this might get something on your channel, and I apologize in advance. But when someone told you that you should take the vaccine, then you shouldn't listen to them at all. Because, and for one reason only, because those vaccines didn't go through the time trials that any other vaccine in history had to go through. Those were sped up and the right safety precautions weren't taken. So when they told you it was safe, that's impossible because we didn't meet the standards that history and precedent had set. So there was no way you could come out and without lying and say it was safe. So it just takes that one thing for them to tell you it was safe and you should take it, for you to never trust them again. And if those same people are telling you to trust crypto for Harris, well, then all the warning bells and whistles should be going off. So I'm happy it's not called Bitcoin for Harris, because I know Bitcoin is for freedom. And that doesn't mean you need to like Donald Trump or anybody in his cabinet or his prideful attitude and mindset. But what it does mean is that you're a patriot, you love the Constitution, and that freedom is found here in the United States of America. And if you want to remain free, that's why this country is under attack, because the rest of the world has capitulated. They're getting thrown in jail in the UK for retweets. Could you imagine if you retweeted
100%.
me and you go to jail? The rest of the world has capitulated. That's why we're under attack. The elitists, those globalists are attacking us. They're trying to bring us down now because they've conquered everywhere else. The fight is here, and we need to come together. United States of America must unite, because united we stand, divided we fall. And now is the time to come together and come under what thing? Orange man? No.
Yes.
Independence? No. Truth.
Yes.
Let's come together under truth, and everything else will work itself out.
100%. And, on this channel, obviously, we're 100% for free speech. I appreciate how opinionated you are. And, to give Elon some respect as well, like Elon actually invited Kamala onto X Spaces. So, it's not like he's one-sided or, picking people. I know he endorsed Trump, but he's definitely giving the megaphone to anyone who wants it. So I think everyone in the US should have that attitude where, we shouldn't be scared of someone saying how they feel or what their opinion is. On the crypto side, like, for me, I would advise people just to look at the actions, don't look at the words. You look at the Dems, you look at what Gensler's done to the ETF space in the last, few years. You look at Operation Choke Point. You look at the reset meeting you just mentioned. You look at the invite to the Bitcoin conference that was denied by Kamala. And it's like, I want everyone to support it. And I think it'd be great for the US if every single politician supports it. But right now, I'm seeing two favorites right now, RFK and Trump, and they're the only ones just sticking out their neck, saying the things that the Bitcoin community wants to hear. Not only saying the things, but also walking the walk and coming to these conferences, talking to us. And, that's really promising. But CJ, I really appreciate your time today. It was really great to meet you. Like always, you've got phenomenal insights, and I really hope you continue doing this. The community needs you, and folks who still need to be flipped to Bitcoin need you. So keep your voice strong and keep educating, and hopefully maybe we can do this again sometime. I really enjoyed it, and this was super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you as well. Keep up the great work. Keep pushing. Remember, the goal is to orange pill people, because nobody knows when trust is going to be lost. But we can feel it in our gut. Just like a decade ago, I could feel it in my gut after the light bulbs went off. This is going to be big. Well, we can feel it in our gut. Something big is coming, and you have to protect yourself. And even if you're a Bitcoin billionaire, that's not enough. You need to understand how to defend yourself in self-defense. You need water, energy, community. Get out there, meet your neighbors, shake hands, make friends. Remember, united we stand, divided we fall. Thanks for having me, and I'll definitely look forward to coming back again.
Thank you, CJ.